A while back, I taught you guys how to make this easy quilted zipper tote, and we're gonna add a little more pizzazz by adding a block to one side. All right, so this is the great little bag we're gonna make today. It is based on the easy quilted zipper tote pattern. And so all of the construction besides this beautiful block that you see behind me is exactly as it is in this pattern and as it is in the original tutorial. But we're gonna learn something new today. We have this great new template from Daisy and Grace called their Y-seam tool. And what this does is it takes all of their Quilt As You Go templates, which you see some of here, and it turns them into regular piecing templates by giving you the marks for where you need to start and stop your stitching to do some Y seams. So I thought, what better way to do this than to make one big block, learn this together, and add it to our bag. So let's dive right into it. All right, so for today's project, we are going to be using this 2.5-inch jewel template by Daisy and Grace. We're only going to be using the inside portion, so you can set aside the Quilt As You Go. We're also going to use the 5-inch diamond and the 2.5-inch half hexie. And so if you have these, go ahead and grab them. And then of course you're gonna need that Y-seam tool as well. Of your background fabric, whatever's gonna be the body of your bag, your lining, your straps, I went ahead and did the same fabric for all of this, which means you're gonna need 2 yards. I use this beautiful Essex linen. And then of whatever the petals are, you're gonna need about 1/4 yard or a fat quarter, and then even less than that for your center. And so these are the 2 colors that I chose for that. So to start off with, we are going to do some cutting of our orange, since that's the middle of our flower. We're gonna cut 2 of our half hexie shapes. And so I'm just gonna lay this here. So we're gonna make sure it's nice and straight. This looks like a straighter edge. I'm just gonna lay this along here, and we are gonna cut out 2 of our half hexies. There we go. So I'll set these aside. And so really, even if you just had a 5-inch square for your center, that would be perfect. You don't need very much of that at all. And then from the pink, I've already done some cutting on this one, you can see, but we are gonna cut some more of our petal shapes. That's what they call the jewel template. And so you're gonna need 6 of these total. Let me move these over to the other side. And I just like to kind of turn it every which way to fit as many as I can with as little waste. So we're gonna cut this one right here. Oops, let me cut through that so I can get that out of the way. And then I'm gonna rotate this so I'm not cutting towards myself. We always wanna be safe when we're cutting. Spin a little bit more. I'm gonna go ahead and cut off the rest of this fabric. There we go. Just like so, until you have 6 that look just like that. We'll set that aside. And then lastly, we are gonna use our diamond template, and we are gonna cut 6 from our background fabric. And so I just have a strip. I could even get a little bit wider. I think this is exactly, it looks like it measures 1, 2, 3, 4.5 inches tall, just shy of that. So if you cut a 4.5-inch strip, you could just lay this on here and have little waste. But whatever you have will work. And so let's go ahead and just cut a few of these out. There we go. All right, and you'll just continue until you have 6. In addition to that, to finish off the front of your bag, you're going to need 2 10-inch squares and 2 2.25 by 20-inch strips of this fabric. So be sure and do all of that cutting and have it ready to go. And now let's dive in how to sew these Y seams. So Y seams aren't as difficult as they appear or as some of us fear, especially when you have a marking tool like this one. And so we're going to start by taking a few of our jewel shapes here, 2 of them to be exact, and these are going to match up like this. But the thing that we need to remember is that eventually this is going to have to be set in as well. So here is that Y seam that we're referring to. And so I'm going to use this tool, and you'll notice on the different sides there's hexagon, diamond, and pentagon. And so what you're looking for is, will this fit? And so see how this angle is not right? I know that's not the mark that I need. And so you're just going to rotate it until it nestles right up with your piece. And so this is the side that I'm looking for. And so then I'm going to take a marking tool. I just have a pen here, and I'm going to put a dot right inside there. And so you can see how that looks on the fabric. And then we're going to flip this over and do the same thing to the other side. And what this dot is going to be is our starting and stopping point. And so we do not want to stitch past that dot. And so even when I lay these right sides together, I'm actually going to mark it on the side that I'll be looking at when I'm sewing. But I wanted you guys to see what I was referring to. So we're going to make a mark here. And so that's where I'm going to start. And then when I come down to this side, I need to do the same thing, because all of these little joints are going to come together. And so we need to make sure we're not sewing past that so that we can add our Y seams. So then another little dot right here. So we're going to start with my needle right there, and I'm going to stop at this point. So let's take this to the machine. Okay. So lining this up, I'm going to put my needle down right in that first dot that we marked. And I'm even going to take a stitch and back stitch 1. And then we're going to sew until we get to our other dot. And we're going to be really careful as we approach so that we do not go past it. I'm going to back stitch and trim my thread. And so that's what that looks like. You can see I've only stitched between those 2 marks. And so now we can open this up, and we're going to next add this diamond shape. So this is going to fit in here, and this is going to be our first Y seam that we're going to stitch. And so let's go ahead and use our tool. We have this little shape right here. We're going to make a mark on that fabric. And when I flip this over, I can see my mark right there. And so when I match this up, we're going to do one side at a time, and we are going to start and stop at that mark. I want to make sure I can see it. And if it helps for you guys to pin this, you absolutely can. And so as I come down here, I need to mark this opposite side. Actually, this one doesn't intersect, so I don't think I need to mark this opposite side, because once we add our diamond shapes, that's what's going to round out this block. And so we can actually sew all the way off. So we're going to start on this side, and we're going to start right at that point, and we're going to go all the way to the end with a 1/4 inch seam. So let's go ahead and take this to the sewing machine. When you have this little guide, it really makes this whole process so much easier. So again, I'm putting my needle down right in that mark that I drew. We're going to take 1 stitch forward, 1 stitch back, and then we're going to sew all the way down to the end of this. There we go. See that first little seam? This is looking exactly right. And so now same idea, except we're going to flip this over to the other side. And so since I haven't stitched on this side yet, we're going to make that mark as a reference. So I'm just going to set this in right here. And at this point, you can kind of see where you already started and stopped. So if you didn't want to mark every one, you can probably tell, but this is just a great reminder. When you see that little black dot, it's time to stop. And so again, we're going to line this up. We'll start all the way at the end here, and sew until we get there. we go. All right, moment of truth. That looks so nice. Let's give this a press so we can get everything laying nicely. And that looks absolutely beautiful. So I'm going to continue building out the rest of this half by adding another petal and this piece here and then this piece here in the exact same way that you've seen me do. And when I have this half done, I'll meet you back here. All right, so here is our half all complete, and I have another one ready to go. And so you can see those are going to come together just like this. And then to finish out our flower, we'll add in these last 2 diamonds. And so 1 straight seam across here and 2 more Y seams on the side. And so then we're going to have a block that looks like this. So I've already sewn that one together. And now we need to finish up these, you know, outer angles. And the easiest way I found to do this is kind of some tricky math. I just took 2 10-inch squares, and I've got these stacked up right here. And we are just going to cut these point to point once in half. And then I can just add these to my 4 corners. And you can see these are too big. We're going to trim it all down. And so we're just going to start with 1 and add 1 to each side. I can go ahead and do opposite sides, then we'll trim these and come back and do the other 2. I can just kind of float that on there. All right, so we're just going to line this up and sew down with a 1/4 inch seam. And I just want to make sure that it's going to overlap that first triangle that I sewed, which it is. And like I said, we'll trim off that bulk later. There we go. And then we can flip this around and do that same thing to this opposite side here. So again, just making sure we're going to overlap that bottom edge and sewing with a 1/4 inch seam. All right, so now let's press this. All right, so once we have this nice and pressed, we need to go ahead and add our other triangles to these 2 sides. And so I want to point out the goal that we have here is to be able to square this up into a rectangle. So we actually want to cheat this up a little bit so that we can come back and have enough fabric to square this up. And so same thing on this side. You're kind of ignoring where they intersect, and we'll trim off this bulk later. And so we're just going to add this to this side, basically centering it up on that a little bit more to the north if you need to. So we'll sew this side and then we'll come back and add the other one as well. All right, so now we're just going to sew this down with a 1/4 inch seam. I'm just using my top triangle as my guide. I'm not worrying about this extra fabric at all. There we go. And so now we can turn and do the same thing to this other side. Remember, we're going to center that up on that bit that we're trying to cover. And we are going to sew our 1/4 inch seam. All right, so now we're going to press this back. on both sides here. And I'm going to start by using the straight edges of my block, and we're going to come and just follow along with that, and we're going to trim this off straight. So let's go ahead and do that. And we'll do the same thing up here. There we go. And we're going to flip this and do the same thing to the opposite side. All right. And so now this should measure 15 3/4 inches tall, and we need to trim it this way to 20 inches. And so I'm going to measure over from my center point 10 inches in both directions. So I'm at the 12-inch point here, which means I need to come over to 22. And we can just square this up. Okay, so we're just going to line this up on the 22, and we are going to cut, and I'm just going to go a little ways and make sure I'm straight at the top here. Trim that all the way off, and then we can flip and do the same thing on the other side. Because remember, we want this to measure 20 inches across, so I'm just going to make sure everything is nice and straight, and then we'll come and we will give this a trim. And if for some reason, like this little corner looks like it might be just a hair short, I know I can catch that in my 1/4 inch seam. I probably just needed to shift this triangle a little bit farther north to cover that. There we go. Oops, missed this bottom edge. All right, and so now our trimming is done. And now remember, we have those 2 1/4 inch strips. So we're gonna add 1 to each of these sides here, and the whole front of our bag will be done. So let's go ahead and sew those down, and I'll meet you back here. All right, the front of our bag is all complete. You guys have learned how to use this great little Y-seam tool and tested one block to learn that skill. So I hope you really enjoyed it. So now you will finish this bag exactly like the original Easy Quilted zipper tote. And so I will just use some Bosal foam, press this onto here to hold it in place, and then I just did some simple crosshatch quilting. Let's actually bring the bag up here because I did do some echo quilting on the flower itself. I want to make sure you guys can see that. So you can see I just, followed the color of the thread, and I went around the middle and then added some detail around the petal itself, and then finished out all of the background with that crosshatch. And so be sure to pop over to that original tutorial to figure out how to do all the rest of this bag construction. The only thing I did differently is I just left off the zipper, and so it's just an open top tote where that original also has a zipper option, so you could totally do that as well if you want. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you next time on At Home. Hey everyone, it's Misty. Thanks for watching At Home. If you aren't already a part of our Missouri Star family, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell if you want a notification every time we release a new video. I'll see you next Monday on the newest episode of At Home.